Welcome to this Maths Made Easy video on outliers and interquartile range. To start with, let's just discuss quartiles and the interquartile range. So quartiles are values that split the data into 4, in the same way that the median splits the data into 2. And remember, the median is the second quartile here. So to start with, to find the median, we would simply find n over 2. So this is for the median. And this is something you should already be familiar with. So this is n over 2. Now n is the frequency here, and if this is a whole number, the median is the average of this term and the one above. And if this isn't a whole number, so it's not a whole number, then we simply round the number up to find the position of the median term. And we find quartiles in a very similar fashion. So for example, the first or lower quartile here, so this is the first, sometimes known as the lower quartile, and here you may also see this denoted as Q1. Okay, so you might see it denoted as Q1 there for the lower quartile. Well, this is calculated as n over 4. Okay, so that's n over 4. And again, if this is a whole number, then the first quartile is the average of this term and the term above. And if this is not a whole number, then we simply round this number up to find the position of the first quartile, or the lower quartile there. So we take a look now at the third or upper quartile. So the third here or upper quartile. And again, just like we saw with first or lower quartile here, we sometimes can denote the first or lower quartile as Q1. Well, in a similar fashion here with the third or upper quartile, we can denote this as Q3 here. Okay. Well, the way we calculate this is to take n over 4 and times it by 3. So that would give us 3n over 4 there. Okay. And again, just like we've seen with the lower quartile and the median here, if this is a whole number, then the third quartile is the average of this term and the term above. And if this is not a whole number, then we simply round this number up to find the position of the third quartile. Now it's important to note here that we always round up to find the position of the quartile, even if n over 4 or 3n over 4 would usually be rounded down. Okay, so that's very important to know there. And finally, we can define the interquartile range here. So I'm going to call this IQR. So this is the interquartile range here. And to calculate the interquartile range, we do the upper quartile, Q3, minus the lower quartile, Q1 here. Okay, and that simply gives us the interquartile range there. So that gives us everything we need for quartiles and the interquartile range. Now let's take a look at outliers. So the interquartile range provides a method to deal with outliers. Since it's not calculated using any outliers, because it's the range of the middle of the half of the data, it's sensible to say that an outlier is a certain multiple of the interquartile range below the first quartile or above the third quartile. An exam question might, for example, provide a data set and ask you to calculate the interquartile range and find outliers. It's important to note here that the particular multiplier you need to use to identify any outliers will be given to you in the question. So for example, a very typical example would be 1.5 times the interquartile range. So 1.5 times the interquartile range. And then what you do is you take that value into consideration, and that's going to be below the first quartile, the lower quartile, or above the third quartile. Okay, so there's not too much to say for outliers there, but that gives us everything we need for outliers. And that concludes this Maths Made Easy video on outliers and interquartile range.